You're listening to Secret Sonics, a podcast exploring the creative side of music production. Join us weekly for honest conversations with real-world music producers and audio professionals. Hello, and welcome back to Secret Sonics. I'm your host, Ben Wallach. It's just me today. I wanted to do a little solo cast because I kind of ran out of episodes again. It's what's been happening to me. I think the end of the year, everybody was taking off except for me, and then I was reaching out to all these people, and I have all these people that accepted that want to come on the show, but they never booked a time, and I just kind of ran out of episodes. And between that and parenthood and all the insanity that my life has been for the past half a year, just had to accept it for what it is. And you know what? I think this is actually a great opportunity to kind of talk about things that I've been learning from the podcast and how I'm trying to apply them in my business and in the work I do. So I thought I would do a little solo cast today about, lessons I've taken from the past year in the podcast about mixing specifically and how I'm, going to plan on trying to apply them this year as an engineer. So let's just get right into it. Let's start with low end. This is something that has been a work in progress for forever for me, obviously. I learned a lot in the last year about it, and it's been, I'm continuing to improve. And I remember talking with Evan Morgan towards the beginning of last year of 2022 about getting the phase alignments right, and that being paramount and crucial for, getting that low end to really, feel right. And I was talking to Bob Horn in the previous episode of the podcast also about how the bass lines up with the kick drum and all these little minutia of the low end that matter so much. And that's something that I've been thinking about a lot and making sure that my bass and my kick are hitting at the right moments. And if I'm using multiple samples of kick drums and making sure that they're in phase with each other and sometimes even manually dragging them to the point where they sound right. And maybe that's just a few milliseconds either way. So I've been thinking a lot about phase alignment, getting the bass right. And Bob also talked about masking, moving frequencies away from the low end or moving frequencies, that are distracting other frequencies. So these are things that I'm constantly thinking about now. Also, just being able to hear the low end really well in this room just that alone has helped me get better, low end. And that started with, first of all, moving into this room, which has great acoustics, and then getting these monitors, which I got a year and a half ago, the Focal shaped twins. Where the low end just is so nice and I can hear everything. And so maybe down to 40 hertz, maybe not mastering territory, but still, I don't know, bass seems to be translating really well out of this room. But yeah, that's the biggest lesson in the low end is just getting it right, making sure that the phase is aligned and nothing is getting in the way and there's no masking and hearing everything that you need to hear in order to get that low end just right. The other thing, and this is maybe the biggest thing I've been thinking about, for the past year is stereo bus processing and how much I'm relying on it or versus how much maybe I shouldn't rely on it. And so, I remember back earlier this year, I spoke with Daniel Silberman and we got really deep into his stereo bus processing, and that, inspired me to buy a bunch of plugins and really experiment with digging into, pushing into certain plugins and getting different sounds. I remember I got the Pasiq, which is Plugin Alliance's Pultec with different frequency notches and stuff, and that thing adds so much amazing color to the bottom and the top. And I'm still using that here and again, and I've been using the Townhouse bus compressor a lot, and I find it's a superior SSL style compressor, for getting the punchier SSL kind of thing. For softer stuff, not as much. But yeah, I've dug really hard into pushing into all kinds of things, including the black box from the HG, the HG2 or something from Plugin Alliance, which is phenomenal. And I really feel gives my mixes a massive depth, that kind of analog thing that people talk about. So experiment with really mixing into all these things. And then I chatted with Tim O'Sullivan, who was telling me about how deliverables are changing and we want to, every stem should kind of add up to the full mix. And so when you're doing that kind of thing, he's talking mostly about exporting for things that will eventually become Atmos mixes and stuff like that. That's not something I'm really worried about. But what did resonate with me is, if you get it right earlier in the chain and you're not so reliant on your bus compression, then, maybe your mixes will actually even be better. And so I've been thinking about that. And I've noticed that, sometimes I've been pushing too hard into some plugins, particularly the black box and stuff. and I've been figuring out how I can move it down the chain. So not necessarily on individual tracks, but on the buses that I use for, drums, bass, guitars, electric guitars, vocals, backing vocals, and using a lot of those same plugins I've been kind of working with and just pushing them at like an earlier stage of the mix, not in the stereo bus, but in like the actual, those buses like I was talking about. And so sometimes different amounts of that kind of saturation, let's say for like the black box plugin, or different amounts of, compression, on each of those. I'm still using bus compression. I haven't been figured out a way to get rid of that yet. But like there's things inside the individual stems that I could do more of that affect those colors, and therefore there's less coloring on the master bus, and I'm less reliant on it, and I don't feel like there's any less glue. So maybe because I'm still using the stereo bus compression and stuff, but I'm finding that this is kind of working, trying to move those things that I was relying on in the stereo bus down the chain, and we'll see how the year, how it pans out this year. But I'm going to be trying to, continue to move things down the chain and see how that works for me. So that's something that I'm thinking a lot about. Yeah, trying to not rely as much on the stereo bus processing, not because I'm planning on doing anything with Atmos, because I'm really not, but, nor could I in this room. I mean, unless I get like one of those headphones or something. But yeah, like, I'm not that interested in it. But in order to get like better mixes from the get-go and not relying so much on just like those few tools at the very end of the chain, like let's get the mix really proper down the line. So that's something that I've been thinking a lot about. The other thing is, being fast. I'm thinking about my podcast episode with Brian Bender. I think that was episode 139, which was an incredible episode. And this past year, and he talks about, I asked, like, he does so much, and he works on like music that he cares so much about, and he does it and I asked him like, oh, how much time do you spend on this? Like, must take you forever. And he's like, no, this is like really fast. I just mix so fast. I also spoke, this was more than a year ago, but with Noam Levenberg, also like mixing really, really fast and being intuitive and leaning into your creative intuition, basically. And so many times that gets you exactly where you need to go, versus like overthinking and trying too hard to do one thing or another. Sometimes working fast is the way to do it. And so I'm trying to do that, and just always get faster and always think more, intuitively and impulsively. So that's something that I'm, this year I'm going to try to be mixing faster, and getting my sounds faster without overthinking it. I think there's almost like, this leads me kind of to my next one, which is my next lesson that I'm learning, that I'm going to try to do this year, is from Mikko Gordon, his episode, which I don't remember what the number was, but who's worked with The Smile and Arcade Fire and so many great artists that I love. And he talks about, sound should be cool and inspiring and not necessarily perfect. And when you work fast and intuitively, I think you're getting to those kinds of cool, inspiring sounds that bring out emotion, not necessarily, perfection. And so moving fast seems to get that effect better than overthinking and massaging to perfection every single moment. And also, I mean, he talked about in his episode how you capture all these inspiring takes and recordings, and then eventually after the session, after you've been in a flow state and you've done everything really quickly, you can assess and look back and say, oh, this is cool, I did this. Like, okay, wait, maybe we need to change this. But when you're in that moment of like, you're in that flow state, you're not overthinking all those things. So I think, the truth is I already kind of do this with mixing, is that like, I'll usually do like a first pass where I kind of get like a feel of like, this is the vibe of the song. This is the kind of reverbs we're going to be using. This is the kind of low end we're talking about. And then you kind of go back and you tweak and you fiddle everything afterwards to make sure that the, mix two is really something that everyone can maybe sign off on. But yeah, that kind of idea that we're fast, we're in a flow state, and then we assess afterwards. And so, being fast, like, Brian Bender was talking about, and doing your thing and like really leaning into what feels good in that moment. And then afterwards kind of saying, oh, that's really cool. That's good. Let's keep working with that. Or no, maybe I missed the ball there. And that's okay too. But in that moment of like that flow state, let's like really like get in there and work fast. And yeah, so basically that was the second lesson. And the third lesson is making sounds that are inspiring and emotionally, make you feel something versus perfect. How I already mentioned it, but anyways, I'll wax poetic on it now. So like this is something I've been thinking a lot about, and I've spoken with a lot of people on the show this year, including with Nina, of like those perfect recordings that we like love so much, and then we become obsessed with making perfect recordings as audio engineers because that's what we do, right? We hear all the imperfections and we try to perfect all of them, right? We're always striving to make our recordings better, and in that process, sometimes we can lose the emotion and we can lose the fact that we're working on music and something that is beyond the technicality. And I know that this is something that I've struggled with a lot, of like just being like, oh, I can make this more perfect. I can make this more perfect. And then all of a sudden you have this recording that has all these EQ dips and all this shit on it to make it sound more perfect, but then you lose the soul of the recording. And so that's something that I'm trying to apply more also while I'm, in the recording sessions with artists, and also when I'm mixing, of just letting things be. And I've been finding over the past year, I've been using less and less, drastic EQ measures. Everything has been more like broadband. Like I'm not doing these crazy cuts anymore. I don't use soothe that much. I'm just kind of like, Brent Hendrich talked about this on his episode as well, of like, if you get rid of too many of the gnarly frequencies, then it starts to sound really anemic, and you got to kind of leave some of those in order to make the recording sound really good. And so I've been doing less of those crazy drastic moves. I can hear a lot of things, but I'm not doing as much. I'm doing more broadband, and that seems to work. And once you get all that stuff and you go through the auxiliary buses and everything, things seem to feel really good. And so that's kind of what I'm going for this year in terms of my mixes. I want things to feel good, not perfect, and to feel cool even, and emotionally inspiring. So I'm very much trying to walk away from that kind of like over-engineering things mentality to feeling it, And like Mikko said, this was like a big lesson he learned from Nigel Godrich, who is my favorite producer, because Radiohead's like my favorite band, of like, sound should be inspiring. They shouldn't sound like anything perfect, specific. Like, as long as you're inspired by it, it's a good sound. And, you listen back to those records and I still love them and they move me, like they're not the most perfect mixes, right? But they move you. And so I think that's something to keep in mind. That's something I'm trying to keep in mind, of like making sure that whatever the sounds are, they're not perfect, but they're special and they're emotionally captivating, and kind of focusing on that in the mixing process. Yeah, let me think. Is there anything so is that 3 or 4? I don't know. Let's see. We talked about getting the low end right. We talked about stereo bus processing. We talked about being fast, and we talked about getting sounds that are inspiring and not perfect. And so the fifth one is, this is also related. They're all kind of related. The fifth one is stay out of the way. Less EQ, less compression, can do more. And this goes back to that Brent Hendrich thing that I just mentioned, and also Josh Bonanno, who's kind of a minimalist mixer. He uses as little as he can, basically. And he also starts from the ground up. He's not working so much on the stereo bus. This is something that I'm thinking about a lot, of like, how little can I do at the beginning, you know what I mean, of the chain? Like, you don't have to go crazy on every single channel. There are some mixes where I like don't even touch things now, like, especially if they're like blips and bloops, you know what I mean? I don't know. some like, sometimes there's so many dense things in a mix. Maybe there's like 150 channels. Not everything really needs treatment. The producer kind of has it there, and you kind of just bring it up, and it's adding to the thing, but you don't have to go crazy. Yeah, not everything needs to be smashed to bits, EQ to bits. Things can kind of like be where they are. And I kind of talked also about using less sharp cues and more broadband, that kind of thing. Letting those sounds exist, and without having to, go crazy. Anyways, so these are kind of like the 5 things I've been thinking about moving into this coming year of, obviously they already started in 2022, but moving forward into 2023, these are things I'm still thinking about, and still striving to improve upon. And so maybe this is some fodder for you guys to think about, what are some lessons you learned that you're trying to apply in your mixing, and keep on that path. So yeah, I guess I don't know what else I could talk about in terms of like this. I thought it'd be cool to make like a catchy, catchphrasey kind of title, like 5 lessons I'm applying to mixing this year. But that's basically it. Those are the things I'm thinking about right now in terms of mixing. I hope these help, and I hope, I hope you guys have a great week. And 2023 is off to a good start. And thank you for listening or watching or whatever you're doing. And I'll catch you on the next episode of Secret Sonics. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Secret Sonics. I hope you enjoyed this conversation as much as I did. If you've been digging the show, it would be awesome if you could share this episode or your favorite episode with a friend or two, and or leave a rating and review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your podcatcher of choice. That's it for now. Have a great week. Take care and dig in. See you soon. Bye-bye.